wait till I can put that away. Yeah. So that's done. I've done it twice. So, thank you all for coming to our final event of Counterpoint. It's brilliant to see so many people coming out, even though we've dragged you out many times this past 6 weeks already. It's the final day and we couldn't let it close without really kind of like thinking about some of the impacts of this and reflecting on that aspect of legacy, of what it means to show somebody's work and to work around it, what it means to be impacted by other people's work, and what we want to share of our own experiences of working and being audience members as well. So we're going to start this evening with some words from the wonderful Michelle D, who has been reflecting on the Red Gallery and her experiences and encounters with it through a performative essay and a poem. And then we'll pass over to Marianne, who's going to explain a little bit, who's going to introduce the second part of the evening, which is some talks by the Lockdown Still Lives group, and she'll tell you a little bit more about Lockdown Still Lives and why it felt like it was a good marriage at this point between the two, between Counterpoint and Harry and Lockdown Still Lives. So after that, we will also have some discussion about things that maybe you'd like to be remembered, but we'll see how that goes when we come to it. But first of all, I would like to introduce Michelle to the stage.
Thank you very much. This is very exciting, isn't it? So, I was always going to write something about Red, and when this exhibition came along, this seemed like the perfect time. Seeing Paul was instrumental in bringing Red to the city. So this is a gallery called Red. Hidden down a side street behind a windowless squat shoebox of a building sits Red Gallery. A heavy metal gate to greet you that has to be lifted on and off its hinges at opening and closing for security. Open the glass paned door, step inside, and you will find not one but 3 separate gallery spaces, each one white walled, as Stieglitz stipulated. Drifting between scenes and identity, I was drawn to the space by art school types who spoke colourfully and cryptically of exhibitions and group shows, private previews, openings and parties. It will almost certainly have been a Friday when I finally faced my fear of what's the worst that could happen if I made my way down Osborne Street and just rocked up at Red for the first time. I'd love to think I was wearing something flamboyant, maybe an arts and craft wrap top in maroon velvet, but likely it was just another band tee and black jeans, the uniform for all occasion, accessorised with a recently added scarf, tied about the neck in a way I hope suggested bohemian. I have a fuzzy memory of being inside Red the first time, in that bit that might have been called a reception, if the place had had any delusions of grandeur, which it did not. Hard to have delusions of anything when you don't even have a Kazi. So there I am, sat on a bench, rolling a cig and another, watching folk as they walk by, before vanishing through a doorway into the interior. Someone sat at a desk, tallying the numbers on a scrap of paper, as more and more people appear, as if responding to some uncertain cue, emerging out of the night to converge on a gallery called Red. "Have you seen the work?" someone asked me in a friendly tone. Just one of the many who had previously disappeared, now re-emerging, animated, engaging in conversations with people who all seemed to connect in some as yet undefined way. "Not yet," I managed, and there being no other thing for it, I peeked inside the doorway and stepped through into a mystery world of artists and art. It was like being given membership to a secret club. All these people, strangers no longer, warm-hearted and generous spirits, who shared time and space and offered invitations to more independent places where this splendid thing called art was happening. People talked to me, asked me what I thought, helped me to think in different ways, forced me to open my eyes, forced me to ask, what do I want? What do I stand for? And I looked up to these people, not just because they knew far more about art than I did, but because they seemed to have a particular approach to life that I wanted to adopt. It was intoxicating, and I was searching for another family, a new friendship group, a new community with which to make my fresh start. Having grown up loving radio and the sound of different voices, like the field recordings of Chris Watson, I discovered that I really liked audio works, soundscapes, distorted humans, and an assortment of weird and wonderful noises, beeping and buzzing and tapping and drones. I was developing my sense of what I liked, and more importantly, what I did not. Would I have gone to the Delia Derbyshire screening without the influence of Red Gallery? Not a chance. Would I have begun to talk to artists and write about the arts without there being a readily accessible, welcoming and fun space in which to grow that ambition? Certainly not. Audio, visual, analog, digital, textile, new tech, old tech, hung on a hook, sat on the floor, rubber, plastic, paper, resin, one time even water. Tiny soldiers, gallery manoeuvres, temporary partitions, peepholes and peoples, legends writ large on the wall, looped human voices, heralding laughter, the inexplicably funny repeated mention of Cliff Richards in a work on coastal erosion by Philip Barnes. Numbered series in endless variations, prompting more questions than answer. Live performance, live art, art as performance, performance as art, life as performance, life as art. The louder, the weirder, the better. Unholy sermon sounds, metal gouging tarmac, fire engine snarls, white wall echoes, miles and miles of wires and cables plugged into old TV screens that hive and hum into life. High art versus low art, pizza versus canaletto, blank newspapers, child heads rubbernecking, wedding dresses dripping, bucket hats on strings swinging, floor-to-ceiling abstracts, ornate frames barely containing the magical beams, monochrome photographs, prisms of light, lost and found objects, all triumphantly housed inside a gallery called Red. There is something really special in someone choosing to share a story with you about a time, a particular formative moment. Their eyes go all twinkly, the voice changes during the telling, They hope you will realise just how good, exciting, important it was. The example, the story of some fantastical looking and sounding paraphernalia erected on the roof of the gallery for a show that took place during the heyday of audio experimentation in the city. How I'd have loved to have seen it and heard it. And in some strange way, that story becomes part of your story. I remember how one time the space was transformed into something more likely to be found in Wonderland, where the end of the gallery was made impossibly small. Curiouser and curiouser, said Alice, and I was. I branched out from Red Gallery and found Blue Lamp, and the Boat House, and later CAG. All those haunts, lost to time, that are today seen as touchstones of the independent art community in the city. Places where artists who were already making their way and artists who were just starting out could commune, share ideas and beers. Folk who you may only see once a month from one opening to the next. We were not ships in the night, leading lights on, passing the other with a cursory wave. No, these were people in the know. People with whom you had shared experience, a shared memory, shared ideas, cried with laughter, cried with tears. Each having felt the thrill of discovering something new, something precious, and something to hold on to, like a secret, in the perfect paper style. Red Gallery was no idyll, a gallery with one sink, no loo, and seating which was less than salubrious. The wine was invariably cheap, and the nibbles cheesy proofs or peanuts, if you arrived early doors. And during the day, the space could feel echoey and cold on account of the hard floors and the no-window scenario, letting in little, if any, natural light. This was especially noticeable if you were invigilating a show on a chill winter's afternoon. I remember a day helping to clean the skylight of moss and grot that had built up over the years. But on opening night, what a transformation. Red Gallery was a labour of love, staffed by volunteers, and at times because of this, it may have appeared a little chaotic to outside eyes. You might say it ran to the beat of its own clock, no sense of urgency. It existed in this unique way, passing through various gallery committee members, showcasing over 500 artists for nearly 2 decades. A generous peppercorn rent and various pots of money achieved through hard-won Arts Council applications kept the building standing without ever supporting any staff paid full-time. In spite of all this, or perhaps because of it, people like me could find themselves sheltering from the downpour of a Sunday afternoon, cooped up knee to knee, engrossed in experimental electronica, or leaning in the doorway, clutching a warm stubby to witness a mini spectacle on a Friday night. Alice once more, transported to a place where time and rules didn't exist, with a roll call of similarly wonderful, curious characters. As the months and years rolled on, I developed as a person and a writer, and through the encouragement of people I met in these spaces, I went back to school and studied. I used to look forward to doing a preview night crawl where lots of shows across the city opened on the same night, starting at Artlink, hot-footed to Red, and then finish the night on the marina at CAG. You might catch folk coming the other way on the A63 crossing, having started the night in the fruit market and now heading back to 825. It was exciting to feel like you were a person who knew about these things, who went to these things. And I would go on to become a person who wrote about all these incredible things happening just behind the curtain. There I was, a new sense of purpose, a new sense of identity, a role within the makeup of fantastical characters involved in art spaces in Hull. People ask, how do you find out about this? I go to stuff, and it really is as simple as that. You realise the pool of people that go to stuff is quite small, and the same people begin popping up in different spaces. Alliances and friendships form, and you found your family. It has to be said and understood that Red couldn't have existed without the building owners and the city council say so, and without that token rent agreement. And it is no use, as I learned perhaps a bit late, I was loyal, what can I say? Directing daggers at the new developments that sprung up after Red Gallery was razed to the ground. Progress is inevitable, and so are car parks. But many things, a lot of them positive, have happened as a direct result of that progress, including a whole bunch of Red Gallery regulars, artists and more getting work in the new developments, and bringing with them a little touch of that intangible redness. Do I miss Red Gallery? Yes, I do. I miss having an artist-run space, the first ever in Hull, in which you could do anything at all. That was one of the things that made the space so exciting and dynamic, and ours. There were few rules, and the spaces were a surprise with each new show. It was a gallery where you didn't have to explain your work or make work to fit someone else's criteria, or worry about footfall. On opening night, you might count anywhere between 15 or 55 through the door. So, you want to draw live an archipelago of imagined islands for 2 hours? Go right ahead. You've reinvented the alphabet and assigned every letter a musical note. We are here for it. You have spliced the word Cliff Richards, and we've done that one. Rest in peace, Philip. If you have created hundreds of numerically patterned 3x3 squared tiles and are now marketing them with an elastic price structure, sign me up. If you have filled the space with water, built a red maze, and in the centre sits a large bed, then Red, I am home. Thank you. This star was from Kirsty Burnell's show. Someone might get to tell what year it was. But it fell when I walked into Gallery 3. I was invigilating there, and it just fell in front of me. And I've kept it ever since. It sort of represents Red. Now, I think that follows a short film. Uh-huh. A very short film. But thank you. Oh, maybe I should introduce it. Should I introduce it?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
So I made a 1-minute film, and then left an image about there, so it became a 3-minute film by accident. And this shows Red, well, a bit of Red, in the winter of 2010. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Red was clearly a massive influence on... That was beautiful. Oh, yes. Red was clearly a massive influence on Harry and everything that we want to be. And yeah, and I think on a lot of us here it had a really big impact, that just as you were describing, that opportunity to just try out something that kind of was seemingly ridiculous, but actually worked really well in that space. So I'm now going to hand over to the wonderful Marianne Lewsley-Stier, who's going to introduce the Lockdown Still Lives participants. And then we're going to hear some talks from a few of the members. So, who's going first?
Right, okay. Hello and welcome. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. I just want to kind of say a few words about, why Lockdown Still Lives in this context, and when the exhibition. And Sarah's talking about the exhibition. Early on, she kind of put a call out, for contributions. She was talking about what this exhibition is about. We also kind of talked personally, so I knew what this exhibition meant to her, what the background was, and it really reminded me of conversations we used to have in the Lockdown Still Lives group. Now, for context and for people who don't know what Lockdown Still Lives is, it's a group that formed during lockdown, as the name says. It started with people submitting pictures, still lives of their life during lockdown, but then we started online conversations once a week, and it was a group that came together every week, and we picked themes, and each member of the group would reflect on the theme and present on the theme, and then we would talk about it. And those conversations were really a highlight during lockdown for many of us, but also we touched upon some really pertinent, deep issues that we covered. And one of them was legacy, and what legacy means to each individual artist, but as well kind of how when you travel through life, it becomes more and more apparent and you think about it. And for me personally as well, it's something that, the city has such a rich legacy and such a rich history of art and culture. I mean, Red is one perfect example. This exhibition is a perfect example. But then there is so much that just gets lost and forgotten, and it's this idea about how do we capture that? How do we do justice to an amazing history? And so I just thought when this opportunity came up, it would be really nice for the Lockdown Still Lives group, whoever wanted to present on their thoughts around their legacy, their thoughts on legacy, or just generally responses to the exhibition. And so yes, that's the reason why we're here. And we have got tonight, we've got Julia Roach, Roger Roach, we've got Jill and Caroline, who are all going to present tonight. Is that correct, Caroline? Okay, excellent. And I'll now hand over to Julia. Do you want to go first?
Oh, go on.
Just do anything technical.
Right, well, as you probably remember, Marianne, I used to have quite a lot of trouble with our online computer things. So I've not done this as a PowerPoint because I can't. Not without going. So I'm not having a jumble sale, although it might look like that. But I'm going to hang these few things up first. And you might tweak what I'm going to do about. The other side. I'll start with this and what I've got on. Show you what's in code, but I think you get the idea.
We love a prop.
Yeah. Here we go. Bit of this, bit of that, bit of the other. Bit of Annabelle. Oh, I shared a studio with them, didn't I? What else is looking? Bit of Grace and Perry. Too small for me, I can't wear it. My daughter. Anyway, so it goes on. And talking of CAG, as you mentioned, which was a lifesaver for me actually, for a lot of reasons. Did the female gaze, if you remember when CAG's women got together. So there's another one. And then what else have I got in my magic bag? Oh, socks. Socks, right. Okay, so we've got, who have we got? Oh, but if I go. This is ridiculous. Bit of Mona Lisa. Bit of Andy. You never wear these, do you, Roger? Whereas I can't wait to put stuff on. Right, and then we've got bags, and I think there might even be something to go with my, sorry about this, something to go with my shirt. A wedge, apparently. Right, okay. Does anybody mind if I sit down? I don't know if I'm a walking person. Right, there we are. Oh God, glasses, right. Sorry, can you do my... This is what it was like. It's just like... Roger, come on! Because he used to be in a different room from me when we did. And then Michelle Noble used to say, can you smoke Roger up to me? But it was, actually you were right, it was a lifesaver during lockdown, and we did those, you know, get a glass of wine, sit down, and we ended up telling one another things which we never should have done. We could all blackmail one another quite easily if things be revealed. However, here we go. Oh yeah, I've got a couple of photographs as well, which might help you get an idea about. And that's what inspired me, this guy standing in town wearing a Keith Haring jacket. And I thought, legacy. So there we go. I've even got William Morris. Okay, legacy. When I first went to art college in 1969, yes, I'm not joking, I accidentally offended a tutor whose work I had seen in the Ferrens. Maybe it wasn't an accident, because he had literally been stalking me. My offensive remark, if it was an offensive remark, related to his rather beautiful abstract painting, which I told him would make lovely fabric for a dress. In recent years, a great deal of art has been reproduced on items of clothing, as well as decorating various household items. A couple of Christmases ago, I was given a Christmas tree decoration in the form of Leonardo's Woman with an Ermine. It is delightful, it really is. I once heard Grayson Perry say that he loved a bit of merchandise, obviously. But it's not only contemporary artists who exploit their work for financial gain. Once the printing, making of copies of work was available to the artist, who can blame them for taking the opportunity to sell these copies and increase their popularity? Or maybe some people can blame them. I'm guilty of buying quite a lot of clothes with reproductions of artworks on them. Whether I wear the clothes or they wear me is debatable. Often the work represented on such clothing is of long-dead artists, and perhaps wishing to own these images is buying a dream. The fashion industry may well be preying on our own insecurities, but I prefer to see it as a celebration of talent, which has stood the test of time. There were plenty of ideas that were ahead of their time, and it is only after the death of the artist that they have become appreciated, causing them to escalate in price and become unobtainable for most of us. Radical ideas in fashion are few and far between, but the legacy of the past fills our galleries and pops up in ever-increasing blockbuster shows. Places like the National Gallery and the Tates have in-house shops selling a lot of merchandise connected with their current exhibitions. Not just books, but bags, scarves, t-shirts, and anything else available to buy. We are all, or should be, aware of the carbon footprint of fashion and its outrageous use of water in its production of such items as we desire. So-called vintage clothes have become the must-have these days, but to my recollection, art students always frequented charity shops out of necessity as well as amusement. I am, and always have been, something of a fashion victim, loving dressing up, but I console myself that as the daughter of a seamstress, I would enjoy constructing my outfits and remodelling stuff bought in what Americans call thrift stores. Artists have, in my opinion, always led the field in costume and in their attempts to express themselves, looking for a language of identity. There is no way I will ever own original artworks as the likes of Frida Kahlo, Basquiat, Da Vinci, Titian, Bacon, Lucian Freud, and a million other artists I admire, but I often appropriate work for my own work from old masters such as Piero de Cosme. The older, the better. By doing this, I've discovered a modicum of artistic knowledge. At some point, stores like H&M decided to produce limited versions of clothes featuring designs by Keith Haring and William Morris. By wearing these items of clothing, I am perhaps being a little part of their social history. Foolish, maybe, but both have unique voices which still need to be heard. Ironically, perhaps the clever reproductions attract creative young people who may not even have heard of the artists in question. But in a world that is saturated with imagery, I like to think that the cream rises to the top. Strange that work like Hokusai's Wave can be found on everything from cheap calendars to t-shirts, bags, etc. And it still holds our attention. Talent will out, and if it inspires another generation, that is a legacy worth having. The immortality acquired by these artists, who are reproduced endlessly, is not to blame for our ecological problems that we are experiencing. That is down to the immorality that pervades the fashion industry and business throughout the world. Discernment is perhaps a luxury of the rich, but also of the educated, and perfecting our lifestyle in a moral way will ever be achieved by our going naked, although as life drawing and painting practitioner, it could prove interesting. And that's your love.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julia. That's great. Who do we have next? Who dare follow that?
Should we go along
Oh, Jiggle the Loach, next one on. Do you have to edit this stuff?
You wrote the slides.
I will work the slides. You want to stand or sit? You can
I'll
sit.
try to stand.
Oh, no, you can sit if you want.
I'll see how I sit down. If you put it on the first slide, and then I'll just
Yes.
nod and I'll raise my hand or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, we just get from that. And aha, let's see.
It's the first one. Right, this has certainly proven to be the most difficult of presentations for me in more ways than one. As unfortunately, when tackling the subject, I couldn't get my brain away from legacy being the name of the firm of the Hull funeral directors, which was so recently at the centre of a scandal that not surprisingly made the national news, following its alleged shambolic and callous procedures in caring for the bodies of the departed left in its charge. The extensive local news coverage brought back troubling memories of my own mother's funeral and its uncomfortable aftermath. Prior to the cremation ceremony, my father, possibly in the depths of grief, had made it clear he did not want Mum's ashes returned to him. However, post-service and back in Mansell Street for the small family wake, the question of the ashes quickly came up. And my Auntie Hilda, Mum's sister, politely but firmly kicked off, saying it was important that they be retrieved ASAP. So in those pre-mobile phone days, I trekked off to the public phone box near the launch bingo hall and made a quite desperate call. I don't suppose... No problem at all, sir. This happens all the time. You can collect the ashes from the chapel of rest at your convenience. Feeling very relieved, I returned to the gathering with the news that all was rectified, and as a result, a potentially long-lasting family meltdown had been averted. If I ever had any doubts, I began to appreciate just how important ashes are to the bereaved. A close friend recently confided that he had eaten some of his wife's ashes, describing it as our last act of oral sex. However, as the days passed and some sort of normality returned to my life, I began to wonder and form doubts concerning the logistics of retrieving the correct ashes. Images of an ancient, dust-coated and hard-bitten crematorium worker coughing on his woodbine as he sullenly raked and brushed away the furnace debris filled my head. How could the retrieval ever work? How could that man possibly be bothered? Inevitably, I began to suspect that the funeral directors had just been kind, or pragmatic, or just plain duplicitous in responding to our desperate and emotionally charged predicament. This happens all the time, kept echoing in my head, followed by the imagined coda of, we always keep a bag handy for situations such as these. Just whose ashes did we get and were subsequently scattered on the Harry's plot at Pencloud's picturesque Park Hendy Cemetery? I don't and won't ever know. Mum's probability rating 5% at best. Did it matter? Again, I don't know. Any port in the storm needs must and all that. I have to accept that there is a chance that there were possibly my mother's ashes and redirect my brain down less unsettling pathways at that point. The knowledge itself has become one of her legacies, periodically making its unwelcome return into my consciousness, tainting the many recurring and otherwise happy memories that I have of her and my late father. Consequently, I tend to focus instead on talisman, items imbued with their personalities as my late parents' legacies. Physical objects, some of which have already been talked about at length on previous occasions within this very forum. Objects that still, after decades, crackle and spark with their life force. The tacky ornament from the then very distant New York City, given by our neighbour, which man was always also immensely proud of. My father's lucky shift any rusted nut spanner, and is not quite so effective winning lottery number predictor. I'm not sure just what the word legacy covers. Is it okay for objects to be included? I am well aware that money is readily accepted as such and is often regarded as the measure of somebody's life, and in some quarters is even considered to be the sine qua non. I am no football fan, but reading last week's paper, I could not but help notice the Liverpool fans' assessment of the 23-24 season and their comments on the departure of the German manager Jürgen Klopp, whom it was acknowledged had not been as successful as some of his predecessors, but is recognised both in his own country and Liverpool as a Menschenfänger, a leader who gathers people to them and makes them feel good about themselves. Now that is what I call a legacy.
Let's give it a head over. It's really fantastic images as well. So now we have Jill Howitt. So thank you, Roger Roach. Thank you, Julia Roach. And I think then we have some words from Caroline. So I want to do the slides. I can do the slides. Put some props of my own.
Thank you, Sarah. So, hi everyone, thank you for this chance to reflect on legacy, and to Sarah and Tom for curating the Counterpoints exhibition and programme with so many opportunities for thinking about the impact of the past on the present and the present on the future. Next one, please. The dictionary definition for legacy gives us something that is part of your history or that remains from an earlier time, and reminds me of this quote, one of my favourite ones, from James E. Young: "This instant now and the past remembered." And I thought about what factors shape and redirect our creative work, and what challenges my or our attitudes and changes my or our minds. The word legacy and impact also remind me of cultural evaluations where desired outcomes are mapped to results in linear ways, when in actual fact trajectories can be circular and tangled with unforeseen and unexpected consequences. And thinking about legacy in these times will always take me to our environmental impact, the world our children and grandchildren will inherit. Before I embark on a more personal and Roger-esque investigation of legacy, I'd like to kick off with 3 quick legacy thoughts: the legacy of lockdown still lives, artworks in general, and this exhibition in particular. So, number 1. These snippets of text are from my PhD acknowledgements, where I thanked Lockdown Still Lives for changing the way that I write about art. And that's in that top one. You're in it as well, Michelle.
Oh.
Particularly in the way that I was better able to integrate my personal, family and art history lives. And there's a bit of a snippet there about my kids, and then also my mum right down at the bottom there. We talked about our mums a lot, didn't we, in Lockdown Still Lives. And that's me doing my PhD with Harry in the Bush chair. Next one. Secondly, I love it when the legacy of an artwork is another artwork, and when new works respond to existing ones. Here I connect Lou Bridge W. Howard's Open Bridges with, next one, Banks's Draw the Raised Bridge, and Bankside, the subsequent graffiti and street art that sprung up along the River Hull. These examples are linked, just as the bridges are connected by the river that flows under them. And lastly, to Counterpoints, and my conviction that there needs to be an archive there needs to be an archive of local artist work and artist-initiated projects and spaces, particularly from the 1980s onwards. This should be part of contemporary art history, and the fact that it isn't reveals class and geography hierarchies. And this was something, this would be a great counterpoint to legacy, as I discussed in more detail in my talk for this programme a few weeks ago. So I sort of looked at that in a bit more detail then. Okay, next one please. So this Roger-esque talk follows the tangled web of influences and legacies in my own life. The things that remain with me from earlier times, and particularly the artworks I carry with me. For fellow lockdown still lifers, I'm afraid it's all the examples you've probably seen before. So, I grew up on a council estate with football mad, Reading, Chelsea and QPR brothers, and a mum who encouraged us to do what we wanted, but I've no idea where art sprang from, except I do. I loved the freedom of the art room. I met Duchamp's work at 14 or 15 on a school trip to the London galleries and went off to art school where I painted big abstract paintings. I thought I was Rothko and the bee's knees, freedom and possibility-wise. I only fully realised how conformist I was being when years later I heard Sonia Boyce talking about orthodoxies and hierarchies of art schools on Desert Island Discs. Anyway, art school. I was also social secretary for a bit and booked the police for 50 quid, although nearly everyone in my year makes the same claim. And I actually stood close, but not too close to Sting, at the Christmas disco he performed at. I also met my art history teacher Leslie Kerman, who studied in Newcastle with Richard Hamilton and Victor Passmore when Hamilton was reconstructing Duchamp's large glass. Leslie, who taught art history because they didn't let women loose in the studios in those days, has been a lifelong influence, but one I was too stupid to see for a lot of that time. I also met sculpture fellow Ed Allington. Art school was followed by art teaching in schools, then colleges, and up to Hull with my first husband, Everton, 2 boys, Hull and Everton, and a daughter who is less football focused, born in the same year that I began work at Hull College. I taught CATS, critical and theoretical studies. I also wasn't allowed in the studios, but came to love the job, discussing art, meaning, ideology and Duchamp with students, watching all the ideas unfold. I can remember thinking and saying, there is no other job I would rather do than this. Next one, please. Somewhere along the line, I began my own art history journey, which inevitably my students travelled along with me. Sorry about that. I shifted my focus from painting to public art, and the opportunity to marry aesthetic and social dimensions, the politics from my childhood and family, and the art from art college and beyond. Rachel Whiteread's house was key to this change in direction. Through this artwork, I began to think about presence and absence and the border or skin between one thing and another. This was the first in a growing network of artworks that represent ideas and approaches and which allow me to think, understand, describe and explain better than through reading and writing alone. Next one. In Middlesbrough, I met Temenos, which introduced me to the gap between how things appear and how they are, as well as a more resolved relationship between art and football and their class and gender connotations. Next one. I also found Oldenburg and Van Bruggen's Bottle of Notes, and through this giant tilted form, I also came face to face with the visuality of words, the transit of Venus, Captain Cook, things washed up from afar, or things bottled up. In a circular motion, I was also reconnected to Sting and his message in a bottle. Through a chance meeting with Judith Winter at Ed Allington's, sculpture fellow at my old art college, and also possibly at the Sting gig, retrospective. I also discovered that Judith and Ed, who are artists, or Ed was an artist, had written a public art strategy for Middlesbrough back in the day. Turns out this is a fab document, and I was given a special insight into a fascinating bit of cultural history in a northern, by the water, but not washed up, deindustrialised town. At the same time, college CAPS progressed through different iterations of Hull School of Art and Design and numerous changes to the different types of qualifications that packaged the experience we delivered. Personal highlights include a trip to a conference at the V&A where I heard Sonia Boyce sing the words of a song embossed on her wallpaper, a student visit to Amsterdam, semi-secret evening conversation classes held in the art school, and of course Fountain 17, where we got to celebrate the anniversary of Duchamp's urinal fountain in 1917, the beginning of the Armitage Shanks brand, who manufactured urinals, in 1817, all in 2017 when Hull was City of Culture. I should add that by now I was married to Tone, no particular football affiliation, who works for Ideal Standard, who own the Armitage Shanks brand. So, moving forward in time, and the writing project and workshop work that I do with fish, with the critical fish, where I hope to be a little freer, looser, more collaborative, creative, and less outcome orientated than I was at college, where the personal, professional and creative spheres align more closely. Saying that, most of what I do now has its roots back at the beginning, and an essay that Duchamp wrote in 1957, a year before I was born and way before Barthes published The Death of the Author, called The Creative Act. Duchamp proposed that the creative act, making art, isn't performed by the artist alone, but that the spectator adds his or her bit through interpretation and response. And interpretation and response can happen through thinking, talking and writing, but also through making. This way, the artwork isn't static or fixed, but lives on. Accordingly, I have my sights set on a critical fish issue based on Hull's fish trail, so that each of the 41 fish species is the starting point for a new creative commission, alongside research into their health and population affected by climate crisis and fishing practices, since the trail was installed in 1992. In my eyes, the trail is a fab public artwork which at the outset had the job of celebrating heritage and which I think could be revisited with environmental eyes. And my thinking about public art and environmental crisis, especially sea levels and coastal erosion, takes me to Circle or Charm Bracelet on the cliffs between Saltburn and Skilling Grove. In considering legacy or the impact of the past on the present, I think about these artworks, the Charm Bracelet, Temenos, Bottle of Notes, House, the Fish Trail and Fountain, that I carry around in my imagination. And to these 6, I'm adding 2 more. Mona Hartoon's Roadworks and Janine Antoni's Touch, my walking as art examples. These are all important to me and never far away in my thinking. I've described them as reference points or touchstones, which stand for and help me think through and understand different ideas and approaches. I thought about representing these on playing cards, the cards I've been dealt, and limiting myself to 8 key works, like the songs chosen by guests on Desert Island discs, a desert island being a likely place to find a message in the book.
Wow.
Beautiful again, thank you. And kind of like really interested in the way that you've been picking up on different artworks and the way that we've tried to use this as a prompt to more things coming forward. I think that's what we all try and do quite often with our work. It's not just a closing, it's a start of new things beyond. So can I welcome Caroline to the stage? Do you need me on my knees, Caroline? All right.
Into the gym today, I'm on my knees myself. That's quite really well. Every time I follow Jill or any of the people like who in the lockdown lives, my head's like going. It's just so fuzzy with so much varied stuff. It's unbelievable. When I joined Lockdown Lives, relatively late in the day to some extent, it was more about the talking, not so much the showing of the objects. I hadn't heard about it before that, so I was really glad that I joined because I'm a talker more than I'm a talker anyway. But it was really, as Julia said, it was an amazing thing to be involved in. because every week you've been sort of stultifyingly, desperately trying to find things to stimulate you as a working creative person. And there you were on Wednesday night, whatever it was, and for the rest of the week you had so much stuff in your head, you were buzzing. I did also feel slightly an interloper in the artist side of it, because I still, after all these years and all the different creative works I've delved into, I don't really see myself as an artist. It's that sort of, false imposter syndrome, because I've done so many different things, and maybe in my own eyes as well as others, that can sometimes not be perceived as being an artist, because you haven't got actually any productive product to show necessarily, especially as I've been involved in theatre and performance for most of my career really. Anyway, having come to see this exhibition, and all my life going to see art exhibitions of all types and sorts, I was really very, very solidly affected by the presence of Paul in this room. I knew him a little bit, not very well, I'm not going to say I did, but I had met him, we spent some time together in the past, a good few years ago, and I didn't know that he'd been dead, but at that time I was working over the bridge in the college, Sixth Form College there, so I was rarely in Hull to connect with my art connections that I had with previous 10, 15 years, so I sort of lost touch somewhat with what Red was about and what it was doing, because I was so utterly absorbed and became burnt out, as most people working in colleges do. So what I wanted to talk about today was how much I saw this work as being what I call a real artist, because Hull is amazing. I lived just for 50 years. There's so many varied levels of artistic sort of excellence in this city. But this was a real revelation to me. I knew some of the work he'd done a bit, but seeing it all together, and again, Sarah, I think, here she is, and people who worked on it, it's the most incredibly well put together, curated exhibition. It's got such a lot of strength and solidity. And what for me made it such a solid exhibition was that it was underpinned with such a deep philosophy. And you may not, if you know me well, you know that I'm not necessarily someone who's terribly serious a lot of the time, but I do actually believe that an artist does have to have an underpinning. And so I've written this. Got quite emotional being here because I think it's amazing. Right. I think, therefore I am. I am, therefore I think. Everybody's heard that, even as a little child maybe. I remember it blew my head when I first heard that. That's amazing. The legacy that I think I've been into in my whole creative life is in passing on critical thinking as a core idea. An idea or an area of learning and how to live satisfactory in the world that we inhabit. I use the word satisfactory because obviously we hope for more than that, but satisfactory is good enough, considering that it's so random. By accepting our certain limitations, but also recognising that the choices we're confronted with lead us to some surprising places, and we are more than the sum of our own parts. And in this exhibition, it shows you how deep a thinker that Paul was, and how that does communicate here when you're in this space. One may not get it all, that's part of what I'm interested in as audience perceptions and stuff. It doesn't matter, we will take from it so much of his intellect and his struggling, wrestling with ideas and thoughts. And these are the sort of works that really do it for me. And I'm the same when I go to the theatre or see a performance or anything really. I acknowledge that he has very real challenges, and I think he's definitely an artist who underpinned everything he made, what he felt, with his philosophy. We can see the struggle, it's in the work and in its process and its results. He also taught, as I have done, the vast majority of my arts career, for not expecting to, but that's what happened. I taught art briefly, and I also taught drama, but in the end I ended up teaching drama, theatre sales and performing arts for a long time across the bridge. an unreal understanding of what that area, subject area is, and what the legacy you are trying to encourage in students is not to create great actors or fantastic, look at me, you know, puppet, singing, dancing, whatever. It's something else, and I think that's what I've always been trying to do in my arts experiences. And in his work here, he allowed us to see himself, and I think that's what real artists do, they reveal something. He also taught us in there, and that is what he's left in his work, and it's touched enough people to share it. Is the difference between the legacy of philosophical conundrums, and it's made concrete in here. There's so much art you see doesn't have that underpinning. A lot of stuff you go to, it's okay, but some things do really sort of knock you. And it's the same in all the arts. We don't have to be a major money spinner in the art world to be stamped on the leaves of history. We will be somewhere on the leaf forever. And so here I'd like to, everybody just take a leaf, please. Can you pass a leaf round and take one? This is the sort of thing I would do with my students. When they first arrived in my drama studio, say 18-year-olds, they would be expecting to do some, you know, highfalutin technique exercises or some speech thing or something. And I thought this one, because I pitched it from somewhere else actually. But as it happened for me, this exercise, I think it's really interesting to get your audiences to feel something. I'm a great person with senses. And for the first term or so with my students, I always get them to start to think about the senses in art and what the senses do for you. My first experience as a creative thinker was when I was about, lots of things. But one major memory I have is of my uncle when I was about 7. We were round there one Sunday afternoon, and he was an artist and an architect actually. And he played Samuel Barber's Adagio on a really old radiogram. Well, it would be modern then. It was, and I was stopped in my tracks by it. And all my siblings were outside the garden playing and stuff. And I just kept asking to put it on and on again. And I know that was one of the first music that ever made me cry. I was probably about 7. And I sort of knew that there were things in life that I wanted to find out about and be curious about. And he gave me that EP, and I've still got it. Still got the old record. It was the very first thing that I knew affected me in my senses. Right, when you want to leave, you got to leave?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got one. Right, okay. I'd like you to, when I did this with a theatre practitioner, he turned the lights down for me, and but it didn't matter. Well, I'd like you to just have a look at the leaf, please. I'd like you to feel it and touch it in great, you know, use your senses. See the main stem of it there. Feel it with the main stem. I went on the garden in the rain trying to find a leaf that this would work with. And if you can trace with your, whatever you want to really, just look at the main sort of backbone of the leaf. And just think about yourself as that. This is you living in this moment now. And then sort of take yourself off to the left or the right and keep tracing all the little veins that go off it. And go into tripleches, etc., etc. You can see it goes on and on and on. You may have 2 major stems in your leaf. It's possibly easier to do it from the back as well, because you can actually feel it too, the ridges. Think of that as, if you think of the first set of people behind you, is the first tributary. You could do this as an exercise in thinking about history or your family, or what family means to you, or whatever. But in my case, I'm trying to get you to think of the people behind us who showed us the way, who revealed things to us through our senses. So it's like those grandparents, then maybe their grandparents, the people behind them. Imagine them sitting behind them, standing behind them, and more people are the children, and their aunts, their uncles. And there is suddenly a crowd, a host of people behind you, which you cannot really associate yourself with. I think about that as an artist. I do not think of myself as just someone who just turned up, oh, I happen to be a creative person. every single thing that went into my nature and nurture was really coming out. That's just one way to get people focused, to get students focused. The other things I would do with them at the beginning would be to tell them to share, and we sit down, and again they thought they were going to do something grand and grown up. And I said, right, we're all going to go on a bear hunt now. And we start playing stupid games like running around, being on a bear hunt and taking on different voices. And because they were 18, they thought it was far too cool for school. They saw me doing it, we did it, we had that absolute hilarious time. We revealed so many vulnerabilities, we played around, we did so much stuff that we were all equal in that. The other things we did was like working on the senses. We're talking about 5 things you really hate in all the different senses, or 5 things you really love. And by sharing these aesthetic experiences, we started to talk about aesthetics. And then we started to talk about, well, what is aesthetics? What does it mean? What is the word aesthetic? And these are young people who had never ever even heard the word aesthetic. I'm amazed that schools do not, start these things early. It really depresses me that we still don't have these art words that are, they've been going forever. And so we talk about, well, what is art for then? And they think, we come to do performing arts. I said, no, we're talking about, let's start thinking about the in-depth underneath things. So what does it mean? Why do we go into dark spaces and allow people to do quite awful things to each other? We know they're not real, so therefore we allow it. I started to get them to really question these underneath things. And it was really through other artists that I knew had this depth of underpinning and research in their work, that I knew that if I was going to teach at all, I'd have to do it that way, and not just to what is required in the A-level boxes. And by the time I left the tutor's college, there was a very different ethos coming in. I think I might have been there at a pretty golden time in a way, because we were allowed an awful lot of rope to experiment and play and explore with. Certain situations came in at the college where we were told, you don't need to teach that, that's not part of it. You just need to teach to this syllabus, to that. That's far too much, you're giving them too much to think with. And I used to think that's ridiculous, it's all connected. And now anybody in the arts doesn't realise that, which is why I allowed myself to join the Lockdown Lives and talk about my theatre experiences as a performer, etc. The reason why I went to art school was because it was a sort of dilettante decision at the time. I came from a middle-class background, everybody I knew in my family, etc., had always gone on to higher education. But life throws curveballs at you, and even though I had intended to go to drama school, etc., everything changed when we moved house, and I sort of fell back on my art. So I turned up at art school, I was accepted, because I obviously looked right and I could draw prettily, etc., etc. That's how I see it now. But I had no idea why I was there. No idea why I was there at all. And I think quite a lot of people that happens to. That's just why I had to find a reason to be there. Because I couldn't do it for 5 years, which I did. And came out with it. Okay. But through that 5 years, it made me the person I am now, who has done so many different things. But I can't tell you what it is that I've got to show for it. It's really fascinating. I think if you've taught for quite a long time, like I have, especially to a level where it's a practical course and a theoretical course, you've given so much of yourself away and some of your ideas away that you could have been focusing somewhere else. You wonder, where did it all go? And at this stage, I do sometimes wonder that. But I know that the satisfaction I got was more satisfaction from what you get back from it. I mean, I've met people who said to me, well, I've said to me things like, I think it might have been Suet a few years ago, I'm still going, and said things like, hey, didn't you come in once and do a project on law with us, with a TIE company? I said, yeah, I did. They recognised me, I was amazed. And they said, oh, I did law because of that. I went, what? And they said, yeah, I went to law school because I never thought about what law was. Nobody ever talked about it. No one really knew what laws were. We just did them. There is a law system. It's a bit like the same for art. No one really talks about what it's for. It's essentially functionalist, but that's fantastic, isn't it? That's what it's about. If we don't make things that are essentially functionalist, there's not much left. There's so little left to actually focus on, because life is pretty meaningless. And what everybody does in these sort of exhibitions, and artists and people who make theatre with some sort of meaning or heart, they're trying to make sense like what it's like to be human. And for me, the theatre arts, it was a collaboration that did it for me. I was never a sole worker. I always needed to bounce off other people's ideas and share the other artistic skills that they had with mine. And art school, the 5 years I spent at art school, which was foundation, 3 years, and then a postgrad, gave me the chance to accept myself as a critical thinker, someone who could pull it all together, facilitate others as well. It made me recognise that maybe I wasn't an artist just in that, I was an artist in so many different things, and it might dissipate over the years, and it might be difficult to pin it down, but it was fantastic. I would not have gone to art school. I would not have not gone to art school, even though all my life I'd wanted to go to drama school, because it made me a visual learner. It made me see things on stage pictures that other people I work with in drama, as drama educators, don't do. They don't see the pictures, they just want to look at the text. But I could see the pictures, the text, the physical, the emotional stuff that was required, because I'd done so many things. I want to take you back to the very first moment I knew that I had to get a bit deeper at art school. You arrive, don't you, at art school? Most of you have probably been there. And you know, and I thought, great. And I remember thinking, oh, this is not the course for me. It was textiles. I was told I should do textiles. We talked about this in Lockdown Labs, because my work was decorative and figurative. And that was then. And I was naive, and of course didn't think too much about it. I thought, oh, I'll just, okay, I'll go through the hoops. So I got into Goldsmiths. And when I went to Goldsmiths, it was mainly a female board-headed course, very female. I think it was all females, and taught by all females. That wasn't in itself bad, but I knew that the discussion would not be it was not going to be, I wasn't going to be able to find what I wanted to say at a stage. I remember once opting for liberal studies. It was called liberal studies in those days. And oh God, this option, what's that? Oh, that's interesting. Art bit of art history then. So I went on to art history. Think of yourselves and think of me. And these like wet Wednesday afternoons, you know, in the art school, everyone was like nodding off because they were all tired. And this chap came in, and he was what I call like something from another planet. He sort of spoke in aristocrat, if you know what I mean by that. He was terribly posh. And he was this amazing art historian. And he started talking about philosophy. I thought, philosophy? I mean, I vaguely knew what philosophy was. I was 18. I vaguely knew about Nietzsche, possibly heard of Kant. I sort of vaguely knew that, I didn't know why. But he started talking about Schopenhauer. Don't ask me now much about Schopenhauer, but at the time I was thinking, God, what's this got to do with anything? But I remember distinctly a sort of moment where I thought, yeah, there's so much more to it than just painting something and making something nice or making it look pretty. Or because I could draw, and I had the skill, and I was able to make things design well, and I had those skills as well. But it didn't do anything, it didn't do enough for me. I knew I had to find something else. And it was that, I'd never have known it at the time. It was that, I can see him now, that man, and how I suddenly thought, God, Frank, you've got to get your act together here. You've got to be thinking a bit deeper about stuff. And from then on, I went to all of them, and I started to, as I say, underpin the work I was trying to make, which was okay. But then I started to put these things together. I've completely gone off my written piece, but I'm hoping I've got most of it in there. I think that's really what I wanted to say, that critical thinking is so important to be taught to all of us, because until we start to get underneath things, which is still flotsam and jetsam, you know, floating about, and you're never going to get the answers, but it's about the playing and the curiousness and the exploring, the experiment, and that's what artists are for. And if we don't have them, God help the world. So
somebody once said to me, follow the trail. Follow the trail.
Yeah. Anyway, listen now, I've got to say, but that's well enough. Thank you for listening.
It's kind of touched on so many things that I think Paul would have been really honoured to have felt that it's elicited so many responses it has just tonight, never mind over the past 6 weeks. And so many things that you've talked about, have touched on, areas that Paul had legacy as well, so the theatre and the students that he worked with in set design, as much as within critical art theory. So I think we're going to close the formal portion of the evening now, so that we can have a bit more discussion and chat and potentially have a look around at the show. I'd just like to thank everybody who's contributed, who's come along, who's shared their time and their skills. I particularly like to thank Jay for supporting us with the tech of things and just like emotionally kind of stopping me from panicking about things. And also particularly to Tom Robinson, who's been diligently scanning documents, finding out more about Paul. It's one thing for me who knew and loved Paul and already knew this work to have taken it on, but for Tom to kind of like spend so much time and energy and really getting to know what Paul and his legacy was. And yeah, so as Harry, we really hope that you've enjoyed the exhibition, enjoyed the programme that you've put around it, and come back to see more in our new space. Thank you.